Let us now look more closely at structure. The content of the structure section is the following. We first explore why structure is important in business and what some of the problems are with activity and entity system structure. Then we discuss key concepts and systemic guiding principles of structure in general and specifically of activity system structure. Then we look at redesigning and managing activity system structure. Why is structure important in business? Well, the structure of a business process, for example, or of a functional system determines the efficiency of the process. It also determines the coordination between different processes. So the more coordination we have, obviously, the better our performance will be, and also the faster processes flow and the more accurate they are, the better will be our performance. The structure of the organization as a whole, which is depicted normally by the organogram, determines the coordination throughout the organization. If we have a silo organization, if we have different parts of the organization that are not coordinated, we have a bad organizational structure and we need to restructure. Some of the typical problems of an activity system that arise from a structure are the following. Too slow processing, because, for example, the structures are too far apart, and that could lead to delays or shortages of output. There could be wrong processing, like mistakes, faults, waste, duplications, poor quality of output. Or there could be discontinuity in processing, leading to no correct output, or to an overproduction, or to blockages. Structure-related problems in entity systems typically have to do with organizational structure, most importantly, lack of coordination between functional and business units. This is very typical in the traditional silo-type organizational structures which do not interface. There can also be internal competition, which is typically due to structure, and then duplications of services and products, or discontinuities of services that they are not taken up because of lack of coordination. And there can be accidents arising due to structural problems if the interfacing between units or functions is inappropriate and does not cover a situation completely, or if responsibilities are not distributed appropriately, accidents can arise. This section deals with the key concepts and systemic guiding principles of structure in general. Now, what is the definition of structure? Structure is the stable configuration of MEI or substance. In other words, it is how the substance is configured, what form it has got. That is what the structure is. Now, structure can be a material form, like a thing, an artifact, or a physical entity. It can also be an information configuration. We could call that an information thing, like an idea or a plan, an action pattern, an organizational structure, or a frequency pattern. So if we stay with the example of the organizational structure, what we do when we restructure an organization, we do not necessarily change the substance of the organization. What we are changing is the pattern of the way they interact. We change the form of the organization, but not what the organization does or who is employed or the machines or whatever. It is a reorganization, a reconfiguration of substance. That is what we imply by structure. The graphic representation of structure, we are representing structure through MEI dots that are configured in a triangular way, like this. Again, the orange lines indicate that these dots are connected, that they are a stable configuration. What is the difference between structure and process? Both structure and process consist of MEI, of substance, of meta-energy information. We have defined a structure as a stable MEI configuration and process as a flow of substance or MEI. Is mountain a structure or is mountain a process? But if we go back to our definition of a stable configuration, the tourist coming to the mountain sees the mountain as a stable configuration and would judge it as a structure. By comparison, the geologist who studies mountain and compares mountain over a longer period of time and what changes sees mountain as process. So what is the difference between structure and process? Well, the difference is really the period of observation within which meta-energy information either changes or doesn't change. If MEI changes in the period of observation, then it is a process. If it doesn't change, it is a structure. Ultimately, every material thing, at least in the universe, is a process if we look at it over long enough periods of time. Stars are being born, develop, die. The chair I'm sitting on is a structure as far as I'm concerned at the moment, but if we look at it over a long period of time, 10, 20 years time, it will not be the same. It has changed. It has been a process in the period of time of observation. Okay, let us look at some guiding principles of structure. Structure determines the form of the system or the artifact or the pattern. The same substance, if we are configuring it differently, can give rise to a different form. For example, if we take two glasses, the substance is the same, it is glass, but it is differently configured. The structure of that glass and that glass is different. It has a different form. Likewise, if we go and look at an organizational structure, we can have the same substance, the same activities take place, the same persons, the same resources are employed, but they are suddenly configured differently in time and space. So the structure has changed, the configuration has changed, not necessarily the substance. The MEI is the same, but the configuration of MEI has changed. Another principle is structure channels process flow. If you're looking at the analogy of the river, for example, the water in the river flows according to the riverbed. So the riverbed is the structure of the river. The river cannot flow in a different direction. So the process flows according to the structure, and the structure of the riverbed gives the river the shape. Structure promotes stability and order. Because structure is a stable configuration, and because that stable configuration channels the process flow, it promotes stability. The river always seemingly looks the same, although the water is continuously changing. The river as a body of water looks the same because the structure makes sure that it can only flow in that particular way. So by reverse side, structure tacitly prevents change. Because structure is stable, it resists change and it prevents different process flow. So it makes the system stay the way it is. If you have a particular organizational structure, the decision making, the communication, the information, etc. will flow according to that structure, and even if we want to achieve a different process flow, we will not. So if we talk about organizational learning and we are not providing structures where first of all learning can occur, and then secondly where we record the learning, we will not have organizational learning. So what we need is always a structure and we need a process. A structure without the process is an empty riverbed without a river, and a river without a structure is a pool, a stagnating pool that doesn't flow. So structure is really passive governance. Structure is passive governance of process because it doesn't allow the process to flow in a different way, and because of that, structure is implicit governance. It is not direct governance. Now, as a management consultant, when one comes into an organization and one hears that they have tried to change a system, and they have done all the training and they have done the mindset change, and change doesn't happen, one would look at two things. First of all, is there a structure that prevents the system from changing, or is there wrong governance? Each of the two possibilities that prevent the new structure from happening. Another guiding principle is that structure and process co-produce each other. For example, a particular MEI flow requires a particular structure to processes. Like, for example, the consistency of a particular paint requires particular tools that are able or appropriate to that particular consistency. And it needs to be applied in a particular manner. So the MEI, the process MEI of the paint needs a particular acting and support MEI, and vice versa. If we have already in a production line installed particular tools and particular procedures, we need a particular quality of processing MEI so that we can achieve the appropriate flow. Another systemic guiding principle of structure is that structure is actually pattern. It refers to the configuration of the acting, support and processing MEI in time and space. To give an example, if I take a lump of sugar and throw it into my coffee, it creates a wave-like pattern. If I'm taking a piece of lead and throw it into oil, it also creates that pattern. So structure is that pattern. It is not the substance of the oil and the lead and the sugar and the coffee. So structure is pattern. Within an activity system, structure refers to the pattern according to which the acting and support substance is configured or arranged. Within an entity system, the pattern refers to how the activity systems or functions of the organizations are interfacing with each other, irrespective of the content of MEI that flows in the activity system. So the generic pattern that biometric system theory advocates for organizations is the three-dimensional matrix. Structure can also be multifunctional. That means that one structure can serve different processes. For example, a building can house different activities. We can have a restaurant, we can have a dancing floor, we can have a conference center. So the same structure serves different processes. This section deals with key concepts and systemic guiding principles associated with an activity system structure. The structure of an activity system is the configuration of the acting and the support substance in time and space. Now let us unpack that a little bit. What is an acting substance? The acting substance are the resources that do the processing. For example, in my cake baking activity system, I, the cook, am the acting substance. I'm doing the mixing and all that. The support MEI or support substance would be the tools and the infrastructure, for example, like the kitchen counter, the bowls, the mixers, the room in which it takes place, etc. In an organizational context, we refer to the acting and support substance as the resources. Human resources, knowledge resources, material resources, technological resources, financial resources, etc. If we look at the graphic depiction of the structure of an activity system, we have here the activity system represented by the gray area and the process flow with the various phases of MEI represented by the dots. These processes flow through different structures or MEI configurations. We could call them the workstations. So my ingredients flow through the one workstation where the dough gets mixed and another workstation where the dough gets baked and so on. So what we do in a business process redesign, we are changing the configuration of the acting and support substances and the relationship between them in time and space. For example, if I have cake baking situation where I have to go one floor down to get my mixing bowl, and I have to go to the shop to get some ingredients, and the oven is in the one corner and the fridge is in the other corner and the different ingredients are somewhere else. It takes me a long time to assemble everything and to mix the cake and to produce it. So what I would need to do is I would need to redesign the kitchen to make it efficient, so that with one hand I can get the ingredients from here and the support substance from there, and I move the MEI to the next workstation in a very short distance and in a short period of time. And this is basically what we do in business process redesign. We can also have multifunctional structure. What that means is that two activity systems or more activity systems share the same structure. So if you're looking at the graphic depiction of that, we have two activity systems, for example, two business processes in a financial environment, and they share one structure as, for example, a call center. Or we could have two activity systems, two production lines in a car manufacturer, and they're sharing one structure, which is the paint shop. Each activity system, of course, has its own structures as well. So they're independent until they are combined for a short period of time in a shared structure. To achieve a good coordinated structure, one needs to have careful business process redesign of both of those activity systems. This section is concerned with managing and designing or redesigning the structure of an activity system. To design or redesign the structure of an activity system that is of a project or a function or a business process involves the following. For each processing phase, we need to determine what acting resources and what support resources are required. Then we need to consider the arrangement of these acting and support resources in time and space. We need to arrange them in such a way that the processing that is facilitated by the structure is efficient. We also need to consider tapping between the various phases of the project and ensure that we have got acting and support resources available that can do the tapping. We need to ensure that we have sufficient quality as well as quantity of all acting and support resources available, and if we don't have it, we should consider building capacities through informationizing. That could involve automation, for example, or adding information into the system, or educating the acting resources, or developing them in any other way. We should also build ongoing learning and improvement into the structure design so that in future the structure can learn and improve by itself. We could also consider multifunctional use of the acting and support resources. That means that we can use the same acting and support resources for other types of processing as well. This would mean that we can do more with less. Let us now look at the application of structure in activity and entity systems. The processing within an activity system involves structure, both an acting and support structure. Also, each sub-activity system has its own structures. And the efficient and effective functioning of the activity system requires an optimal arrangement of the structure in time and space. Very often in the context of a business that involves a business process redesign, of which the rearrangement of the acting and support structure is an important part. Another important consideration of structure within activity systems is the multifunctionality of structures. This implies that one structure can serve more than one activity system. An example would be the different production lines in a car manufacturer share one structure, namely the paint shop. To ensure that the structure contributes to the optimal MEI flow within each of the different activity systems that it serves, one needs to iterate between the design of process and the design of structure. The structure in an entity system is concerned with the pattern of interaction of the activity systems of that entity. In the context of an organization, we typically call the structure the organogram. According to biometric system theory, the optimal organogram would be a three-dimensional matrix which channels the flow of meta-energy information throughout the organization in the most optimal manner. By comparison, the restructuring of an activity system is about efficient and effective workflow.